Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning. I'm so happy you came out in this wonderful wet weather. As I was coming here this morning, I thought this would be equivalent to back home in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, a blizzard. And people didn't come out in blizzards. They watched on TV or whatever. Anyway, thank you for being here. It's a really, really wonderful, wonderful day. And we know that this liquid sunshine is a blessing to us all. It's a great blessing. So we're very grateful for it. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, the announcements, and the wonderful song. I want to tell you just a tiny bit what's going on for me. Last Saturday, I think I might have mentioned my mom was very sick. My sister thought she was getting better. All day Sunday, I was in communication with my sister, who lives only a few blocks from my mom, and she was getting worse and worse. And I was trying to book a flight, and I didn't get a flight. And that was good because on Monday she was getting better and better. But meanwhile, my sister Cheryl, who lives in Calgary, decided to go and help. And I'm telling you this for two reasons. And it all has to do with the topic, the way it works. One of the tools that we use, as Reverend Karen said, what we start everything is prayer. It's the greatest tool we have. And so my sister Cheryl had been in crisis, and I prayed for her. And part of the prayer, part of the result, the manifestation of the prayer, was her going to look after my mom. Because while she was in service to my mom, she forgot about her own issues. I could see it. She was so, I was watching on Skype and talking to my older sister while I'm watching my younger sister listening to Reverend Bruce's relaxation CD. I'm thinking what a small world it is and how blessed I am. And then in Facebook this morning, I see that Cheryl wrote, it was the best 3 days of her life. It was the best 3 days of her life. And if I'd been there, she probably wouldn't have gone. So it was, but while I was there, she said to my mom, she said, you should ask Heather for prayer because her prayers really work. Wasn't that great? Your family actually sees what you do and agrees. It's so good. It was wonderful. So that gets me to today's topic. We're doing a 4-part series that's called Back to the Basics. It's the basics of science of mind. And today's talk is called The Way It Works. And as Johnny Coleman used to say, as Reverend Judy often quotes, it works if you work it. It works if you work it. The way it, with a capital I, it, meaning the law of mind, the way God works in our lives, it works if you work it. It works if you work it, the way it works. So first of all, we have to go back to last week's talk, the thing itself. The thing itself is this universal energy, because you see, because we can't just start with the way it works. We have to go back and remind ourselves, what is God? And many of us came from other denominations, other churches, or not a church at all, from philosophy. And so our idea of God might not be what Ernest Holmes was talking about. In fact, I can guarantee it wasn't for most of us. Now, there are exceptions in this room, people who grew up in metaphysical churches. And so God isn't an old man in the sky creating out of. That is not what we think of God as being. In fact, not a person at all, but rather a presence operating through a perfect law. So in our textbook, it says this is universal energy, mind, spirit, intelligence, spirit again, I think I must have miscopied, finding conscious and individualized expression through us. And man's intelligence is this universal mind, functioning at the level of man's concept of it. So what we think it is to us. What we think we are, we become. So there's a story about a guy who was he was shipwrecked, and he found himself on an island. It was a very friendly island. There was no one on the island, but he was shipwrecked on this island, and he learned how to fish and to feed himself, and there were berries and things to eat. And so, but it was years and years and years. So he got busy, built himself some structures. Built himself some structures. And then years later, there was a rescue ship. They saw the smoke from one of his fires, and they came to see what's on this deserted island. Sure, it's a person. How long have you been there? He, for many, many years, had been there. He said, well, tell me, what are these buildings? He says, what's that building over there? He says, oh, that's my home. And I see. And what's that building over there? Well, that's my church. Well, what's that building way over there? That's the church I used to go to. And many of us have been there. That's the church we used to go to. But as Reverend Karen said, we respect and honor all paths. That's one of the reasons we say the flames of faith after the meditation to set the consciousness of oneness. So in this idea is the seed of perfection. The seed of perfection, the perfect life of God, is hidden within us. And here's the issue. And this sentence from this chapter in the textbook is really important. In our ignorance of the truth, when we didn't know what we didn't know, our ignorance of the truth, we have misused the highest power we possess. What is that highest power? It's that awareness that there is that divine something that's always responding to us in impeccable fashion. The law of life just says, yes, my beloved, to whatever it is we think about ourselves, whatever our deeply held beliefs are, that is what we experience. And so we misuse that great power by thinking things that are not true. There's a man, a motivational speaker, and I think he's an author also. And I heard this story, and so I'm not sure if it's Gibbons or Gibbons, but his story is great, so I'm going to tell you the story. He grew up in a household, first of all, both parents were alcoholics. Father was a funny drunk, a happy drunk, but Dad left. Dad left Mom, who was a raging alcoholic, mean and demeaning. Every day she told both of her sons that they wouldn't amount to much. They were bad, they were awful, that their lives didn't matter, and they were just like their dad, who of course was the son of a gun because he left. So that's how they grew up. And this one boy Charles started to believe it, that his life was pretty bad and didn't have any meaning to himself or anyone else. He really believed his mother that he wasn't worth much. And so he decided to end it all. He decided to commit suicide. But the way the story goes, he says, I even wrote the suicide note, but I dated it for 2 weeks in advance, 2 weeks in the future, because I was, I guess, a little chicken. But in that writing, something happened. In the writing of the suicide note, he was free. He freed himself from all of those beliefs somehow. And he noticed something. He said he noticed his life was like a movie that he was directing. Isn't that an amazing thing for someone to just notice that whatever he thought about tended to come about? And he thought to himself, I wonder what would happen if I changed my mind. I wonder what would happen if I thought different thoughts. Instead of expecting this to be a rotten day, what if I expected some good things to happen? And so he started he did it lightly, which is a wonderful way to start practicing the science of mind. Take it lightly. Try it on lightly, like you're trying on a coat or a shawl. Just see if it fits you. He tried it lightly, and he noticed that not every good thought he thought happened, but many of them did. More good things were happening, and as Ernest says, it's about the sum consciousness the sum total of our consciousness, not one isolated thought here and there. And so he began to lift up, and he made something of his life. It started that very moment that he surrendered. He had nothing else. He was giving up. But in the giving up, something entered. And what entered, and this is how it works for us, is that the thing that enters is this. I have this working perfectly. The thing that enters, as I said, yet the thing itself is this magnificent life. It's the life of God, the life of God in you. And it's like God's knocking in your heart all the time, but he wasn't listening because he was so programmed to think that he was a bad person. But in the release and the giving it away and saying, I'm giving it up, that truth itself came to him. And so he started planting new ideas. And that's the way it works. That is simply the way it works. When we think a new thought, we create a new life. So we ask, well, how much good can we have? In the class I'm teaching, the Essential Earnest Homes, one of the meditations that we're doing is simply to get still and imagine that good is filling our heart. And I like the idea that our whole body is like a sponge. And good is, we're just soaking in good. Now, if you meditate on that twice a day, even for 5 minutes, your life is going to show results of that awareness that something good, something wonderful is happening through you, by means of you. So how much can we have? How much can we accept? How much can we find in our own consciousness that is no longer repudiated by our own denials? In other words, how much are we saying, oh, I can't do that. It's too late for me. Oh, I'd really like to travel, but my blah, blah, blah is going to get in the way. Oh, I'd really like to be more creative, but I've never done it, so I'm not going to try it now. Or just even the fear of failure. I'm not going to try it because I might fail. Those denials are what are keeping us away from the good that is basically ours. It's for us. No one can steal your good, as I said last week. There's an abundance of it. There's enough for everyone to have all the life, the good, the harmony, the friendships that they desire. You don't steal from anybody else by having yours. So, I'm going to come back. One of the things that Holmes says in these chapters that's so important, he says, this principle is good and good only. And you might have, if you look at your life, most of us can see there's some things that we go, wow, that's great. And there's some parts we go, where's God in that? And yet God is in it all. God is in it all. As this perfect law that's just simply showing us the sum total of our consciousness. That's all. It's saying this. There is a great story. My sister is a kindergarten teacher, and I have great respect as a former teacher of junior high and high school students, of kindergarten teachers, because that's the first place kids encounter school. And the first place, so if they do a good job there, this story is about a kindergarten teacher, and she was really good. She was asked, because she was so exceptional, to have her kindergarten students put on a play, a drama, for the whole convention, all of the teachers. So there'd be a crowd of several hundred people in the audience. And of course she said yes, and she was excited. She went back to her classroom, and they collaborated like a good teacher would. What do you want to put on? Cinderella, of course. I think in these days it would be Frozen, but it was Cinderella. Cinderella, they said, oh, and they all chose parts, and everyone had a part except for Norman. And Norman was a little kid who was pretty quiet. He hadn't really many social skills yet. He didn't play with the other kids, and the teacher really hadn't connected with him, and she felt like no matter how she tried, she couldn't. So she went over and said to Norman, what would you like to play? All the main speaking parts are gone, but what would you like to play? And Norman said, I want to be the pig. And the teacher said, there's no pig in Cinderella. And Norma said, there is now. It's a Robert Fulghum story. There is now, he said. So the teacher, I mean, he was so enthusiastic. Okay, I could give it a try. He's not going to say any words. And he became Cinderella's sidekick. And so wherever Cinderella went, the pig went. And if Cinderella was sad, Norman was really sad. He had his little Dixie cup nose, he had his pink bloomers, and he didn't say a word except he would show all of her emotions. And then when the prince came to take her away, he got up and barked and danced. And the teacher was horrified. She said, Norman, pigs don't bark. And he said, they do now. They do now. What a great attitude that kid had. So they put on the play, and guess who was the star? Norman, of course. He was the real Cinderella. He came to life trailing after Cinderella, being her emotional gauge and giving his gift. So, the lessons from Norman. So the whole idea, if you think there's something that you can't do, is to have the same attitude as Norman and say, there is now. I can sow. There may not, pigs don't bark. They do now. There isn't a pig in Cinderella. There is now. A 75-year-old woman doesn't take tango lessons. They do now. Do you see what I'm saying? Whatever idea, whatever good idea you have for this next year, and there's some little voice within you saying, nah, you can't do that. Who do you think you are? Remember who you are. You're made in the image and likeness of the thing itself, which is of itself without limit. And so whatever voice is saying you can't do it, I can now. I can now. Thanks to Norman, the barking pig in Cinderella. Yeah. So the thing itself, the thing that moves through us, this principle that we use consciously or unconsciously. And the more we awaken, the more consciously we use it. And at first, we use it in an ungraceful way. We use it to and none of it's bad, but at first we use it to get things. Sometimes in first year class, you might learn to manifest a parking spot. So, I can, by my mind, I can have the spot. And when I was taking first year, the best spot for me, because I was always on a diet, was the furthest away from the door, and that's always the one that I found. But we'd start with those things. So we could say, yes, this thing works. God is working in my life. And then we come to realize that it isn't the thing we're really after. What we're really after is the consciousness behind the thing. The consciousness of oneness, the consciousness of God, the consciousness of grace. So just take a breath. And we're going to pray together. Just take a moment. And know with me, as I speak this word in the first person for everyone here, this thing itself loved itself so much it took form as me, took form as this planet, took form in all good ways. And with the awareness that this greatest gift has already been given, I consciously use it. I consciously use it to love more. I consciously use it to be that which I am made to be on purpose in my life. I consciously use it to know that just as I am and just as I am not, I am enough. I consciously use it when I listen to or watch the news, filtering everything as a prayer request, knowing that I do make the difference. I am a difference maker. I know that this is absolutely so, but I know for each one here is that the intelligence within me knows exactly how to how to be that temple of the living spirit and how to honor that temple and love that temple and be one in body, mind, spirit, full of wholeness and truth. I know that anyone who is here that is filled with fear of any kind, with God in my heart, fear dissolves. It cannot be the same place as love. And so facing anything in my life with love is easy to see the next step and the next step and the next step. I know that it's all so very good. I know that not only my health, my creativity, my prosperity, my relationships, all are experiences and expression of the one life of God. It's very good. It is so good. It is so good to know who I am and to let go of any false beliefs, no matter where they came from. I'm here to love more, to be more. And so it is true. I am. And so, with great gratitude for this thing itself that lives in me, I simply say, thank you, God. Thank you, Divine Mind. Thank you, Spirit, for just being what you are in my life. And with my heart filled with gratitude, I simply release this word to the action and activity of law. I know it's complete, it's done. And please join me in saying, and so it is. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Heather. And please welcome back Jennifer Trevor with a special surprise singer, Chelsea Van. This is a very last-minute surprise.